Hey, hello everybody. Haven't seen you guys in a while. I hope you're doing well. Everything's going well outside anyway. It's not too bad. A couple of 70 degree, or at least in the 60s, one 70-degree day here at my house. So we spend as much time out as we could before it rains. Okay, now you guys just finished up the cranium and you guys took an exam on that and you guys rocked the crud out of it. You did a fantastic job on that, and you guys, I'm guessing, are feeling pretty happy that I forgot my exploding skull at school before they kicked me out. I thought to myself, oh no, I gotta get my exploders. I went to go back and they said, nah, you can't get back in. So I wasn't able to get my exploders. So ultimately, I just had to use a full skull, but that was perfectly fine. That was a nice start, good numbers, kind of taking us into this post-cranial stuff because the post-cranial stuff is a lot more complicated. I don't think it's any tougher. There's just a lot more of it, I think. So going into the post-cranial, starting with that very strong number on the cranial materials, I think this is going to be a good start for you. Okay, so now I'm basically sitting in my daughter's room at her desk with a blanket, a red blanket draped over it as my background. The camera is on a tripod sitting above me. I am my own cameraman. I am my own voiceover. I'm pretty much everything here. I've done some tests to see which direction to hold bones to make sure they come out right, because ultimately my camera is upside down to me. It's backward. So I'm hoping that everything I do, I'll just have to do it backward for me. And hopefully that means it's right side up for you. I'm going to do my darndest to make sure that occurs. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm going to have to make an adjustment real quick after I put out the first bone, just so that I can make sure, because I can see what I'm doing on my little camera screen or whatever, but it's very small, so I have to figure out what the heck I'm doing. But anyway, as my own cameraman, I'll be doing the zooming in and out. This is not my forte, so you'll have to bear with me. It won't be the best video you've ever seen in your life, but it'll be better than nothing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have my computer in front of me, and I'm going to go through the PowerPoints that I posted on Blackboard. I'm looking right at it right now, the exact one that I put online, and I'm just going to go slide by slide through it, and I'm going to discuss what's on there, so that when you're watching this video, I assume probably on YouTube, given the way I'm probably going to do it, I'll let you know, but I'm pretty sure I'll probably put it on YouTube. But anyway, so you can be watching it on YouTube while at the same time, maybe split screen, you can be looking at the actual PowerPoint. Or you can just simply watch the video and not have the PowerPoint up at all. It's up to you, doesn't really matter. But I will be following the PowerPoint point by point. So you will see that. So if you look on the first slide, so this would be for me, slide 5. It says postcranial skeleton. We're done with all the rest of that stuff. This stuff ahead of slide 5 is, the anatomical directions, a number of bones in the skeleton. You've seen those slides before. You had those slides written down. If you didn't, and when I'm talking about anatomical directions, I'm talking about the medial, lateral, proximal, distal, all of those. Make sure you go in and look, because I'm going to be using those terms throughout the video, throughout the rest of the class. I'm constantly using all of those terms, as they should be being used. So anyway, if you're not really sure as I'm going through, make sure you maybe print that slide out. Maybe have it next to you if you haven't studied it and you don't know exactly all the different terms. You might want to have it next to you, because I'll be saying medial, lateral, proximal, distal, be throwing all those words out there. But of course, since you have a test coming up at some point when we're done with the postcranial stuff, and you are going to be tested on those directions, you probably should have those locked into your mind already. So that's slide 3. 4 just gives the general stuff. Again, you've seen that number of bones in the body, 206 or roughly 206. And then we get to slide 5. Slide 5 is the postcranial skeleton. That's a start point, and it's broken down into 2 pieces. I broke the postcranial stuff down into the axillary skeleton or the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axillary skeleton is composed of the vertebrae. Vertebra is singular, vertebrae is plural. I don't go with the vertebrae thing. I do vert and verts. So you'll hear me say that all the time. I rarely say the full word. I don't know why. I think vert and verts is just a lot easier. Then we're going to have the ribs and the sternum. Okay, that's the axial skeleton. The appendicular skeleton will be the shoulders, basically the whole shoulder area, the arms, the pelvic area, so down below, and the legs. That's what we'll be looking at when we get to the appendicular. But let's start with the axillary skeleton right now and start with the verts. That's the best place to start. Let's go with the hyoid, I guess. I forgot the hyoid was in there. We'll get to the verts right after this one. All right, the hyoid is what we call a sesamoid bone. S-E-S-A-M-O-I-D. A sesamoid bone. Sesamoid bones are bones that are not connected to another bone. They're simply free floating, but they're not floating entirely. I mean, they don't just sit there and float like a ghost does. They are connected to other things via ligaments. Typically, it's just a pile of ligaments on one side or the other. Or in case with the hyoid, the superior side is actually one of the attachment points for the tongue. But the lower side, the inferior side, is the attachment point for the larynx. So the hyoid bone is a sesamoid bone in the sense that it doesn't touch any other bones, it doesn't articulate with any other bones, but it obviously has a very important job. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, and I haven't brought this up, I wasn't necessarily going to bring it up now, I bring it up later on. The hyoid bone is right in there. If you're looking at the slide, it's right in your throat. It's actually, if you are looking straight forward, you actually have to kind of poke at your throat and kind of go up under your mandible. It's up under there a little ways. You can't actually feel it, but it's up under there a way. It's completely protected by almost everything. It is a small bone. It's a thin bone. I mean, it's not small in kind of a general sense, but it is a thin bone. It's easily broken. Now, it's not connected to another bone, so you don't have bone on bone kind of that bending, you know, the two sides of it are not connected to a bone where you have those stationary points and then the center part of it, let's say, was being pushed in where then it would break. So there's nothing connecting it that way. So it has to break. If you're going to break this bad boy, you've got to break it in its situation where it's just connected by way of ligaments, but it is not that difficult to do. The hyoid, because of where it's located, up under the mandible, right? It's going to be hard to get to. It's very difficult to break it unless there are certain circumstances, and you can already guess what those circumstances might be. Clearly, you could be hit in the throat. Somebody comes up, hits you like with an uppercut right under the mandible, hits the hyoid. I mean, theoretically, I guess you could break it, but it would have to be a heck of a punch. And most of the time, it wouldn't even do that. It would just simply push it backward. But if it's a sustained pressure, you're more likely going to be able to break it. Now we've got to think about this. What is a sustained pressure that would ever be applied to the neck? Simple. You got something wrapped around your neck. You got a rope wrapped around your neck and it's tight. You have somebody's hands wrapped around your neck and they're squeezing. This is how the hyoid breaks. It's something that is sustaining pressure in that area. So I find a skeleton. I find the hyoid, which is very rare, but let's just say I do. I find the hyoid. Turns out it's broken in half. What does that tell us? What might it tell us? Of course, there are going to be a number of options here. Again, you could have just been hit by something. Somebody didn't do a very nice job of hitting you in the head with a baseball bat and they went up under your mandible. Okay, maybe then. But almost always, if we're talking about a broken hyoid, we're talking about some form of strangulation. We're talking about, it could be self-inflicted. You could have a rope wrapped around your neck on purpose. You're doing it yourself. Or it could be, probably more likely, somebody was squeezing your throat. They were trying to, well, theoretically the idea here is they were trying to kill you, or because I found your skeleton, they succeeded in doing so. So the hyoid bone, again, we're going to have to, give me 1 second. Let me move my screen. Let's see if it flips. Okay. Now that flips it back your direction. I believe it is now upright for you. Gosh, I hope it is, because otherwise this video is going to be totally wrong, meaning it's going to be totally upside down, right? Okay, so there's the hyoid bone. It's a very simple bone. It's just U-shape, right? General U-shape bone. Flip it over, just to give you different angles on it. You can see these little pieces sticking up. Those are not because it's plastic. Those are actually wings that stick up. They're just attachment points. It really doesn't matter. Certainly doesn't matter for us. But that's the hyoid. But this is a plastic model, so it wouldn't break. You wouldn't be able to break that very easily. But that's how it would happen. It would be stationary here and here. And the squeezing, I can barely even move it because it's pretty strong plastic, and I don't want to break it. But the squeezing just simply pushes this area back and snaps it like a twig. There we go. So that's the hyoid bone. Again, it's an attachment point for the base of your tongue and also your larynx. There we go. Okay. Don't need to know anything about it. And actually, I went on in my PowerPoint. If you printed out the PowerPoints I had online before, you would see that the one that I have now up there is completely different than the one that used to be up there. I went into my editing programs and kind of I tried to erase words that were around certain items so that you don't think you need to know those. I tried to take my own photos, which I did. I think I did a pretty dang good job taking my own photos of most of the bones, and then I put those up there so I could give you, even though it's all plastic, it at least gives you a sense in what it would look like with your hands really on it, or what it would look like in real life, rather than just getting pictures off the internet where they may not be showing you exactly what I want to show you. So anyway, you'll see if you had printed that out before, it's not exactly the same. In fact, there's quite a few differences in this one. So go back in and print this one out if you're going to print it. I do make modifications every once in a while, so as we're going along I might think, oh man, I need to make a correction there, or I should add that in. So I do make corrections as we go along. So every time I make a correction, I don't mean a correction as in there was something wrong, I just mean a modification. If I do that, then I will upload right away. I'll upload that latest version onto Blackboard. So I would just every once in a while take a peek at it, make sure nothing is changing. If it does, then there you go. You have to make that modification, and I'll probably make mention of that at some point, but you can also be proactive and just keep your eyes on that. Alright, let's move on now to the verts. Let's go into the axillary skeleton. Interestingly enough, the hyoid, if you guys look in your apps that I gave you, and apps maybe that you have found, the hyoid is listed as part of the skull, as part of the cranium. I have no clue why. It's not connected to the cranium. It's a free-floating, it's a sesamoid bone, so theoretically it doesn't actually belong to either the cranium or the postcranium. But to me, the cranium, it's all one unit, right? I mean, the mandible moves, of course, but it's all one unit. The hyoid sits below that. So for me, it's definitely postcranial. So if you're using your apps and it shows in the app that the hyoid is part of the cranium, ignore that. Make the hyoid part of the axillary skeleton. Okay, the axillary skeleton. But let's go into what is considered the true axillary skeleton. And again, that's the verts, the ribs, and the sternum. Okay, so again, I'm going to reference this PowerPoint that I'm looking at right now so that you can go along and you can see right now the coloration I have on the screen. I have all the verts colored red, yellow, green, and so on. You'll be able to see that as I move down and I go from one type of vert to the next. You'll see that I have it isolated so that you can see exactly which ones I'm talking about. That's on the PowerPoint. Won't be able to do that on the camera because I can't color things on the video, so clearly going back to the PowerPoint is going to be your best idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down through the various types of verts. There are actually 5 different types of verts. The cervical verts, those are the ones in your neck. You have 7 of those. Interesting thing, all mammals have 7 cervical verts. Even a giraffe, anything. It's a mammal, it's got 7 cervical verts. That's pretty cool if you ask me. The thoracic verts make up the main part of your body down to your lower back. There are 12 of those. So those are your thoracic, your lumbar, your lower back, 5 in there. Now, mammals, they differ in this thoracic lumbar setup. It was just the cervical that are the same. Get down to the sacrum. The sacrum is a single unit. When you look at it in an adult, it is a single piece, but it was made up at one point of 5 different verts. They simply fused together and created one unit. You can still see the 5 verts that are present there, and I'll show you this later on. On my PowerPoint, I listed as 5 segments, but really it was 5 verts that fused together. And then you have the coccyx, which people call the tailbone. Coccyx has, most of the time, 4. It can have 3, 4, 5, or 6. It's variable, but the most typical is 4. That's why I have it listed as 4, but I do have it in quotes just to say that that's not a guarantee. It's not always 4, but for the most part, it's probably going to be. Now, those are coccygeal verts, right? The unit itself is called the coccyx, but the 4 parts are 4 separate verts, coccygeal verts, right? You don't have to write that down, that's fine. So we have a total of, if we're going to assume a coccyx has 4, if we're going to go with that, then we have 33 total verts in our vertebral column. All right, so what I want to start with is a list, and you can see this on the PowerPoint, a list of characteristics that you will find on pretty much all verts. Not every vert has these particular characteristics. There are a couple of odd ones, kind of odd ones out, if you will. So I'm going to start off, let's go with this one here. I'm just going to start with this one. Now, when it comes to zooming and stuff, not really sure how tight the image is before it becomes very small on the computer. What I mean by that is what I see on the camera. Is it what you see on the screen on your computer, or is it smaller? Is it a slight bit larger? That I don't know officially, so I'm just going to leave it about like this, and I'm going to hope that that's right. Okay, so this is a thoracic vert. I'm going to show you later on how we know that's a vert. You can pull it up to the side here. Actually, again, I have to remember you guys, it's upside down for you. Or I guess technically it's upside down to me, right? So that's the way a vert looks, right? Sits in the body, essentially like that. We're going to have to assume that there's a person lying on the table. This person is lying on the table. We're going to say they're lying on their back. If they are lying on their back, then it actually sits in the body like this. This point right here is the point that you feel, kind of the bumps you feel going down your back. Every one of those bump, bump, bump as you go down your back is one of those right there, and they're all stacked up, thus giving you those bumps. So we know that this is on the posterior side, and we know this is the anterior side, so the bodies are on the anterior side of things. Okay? Alright, that's just another way of looking at it. Alright, so let's go through and let me point out a number of features that you will find on, again, pretty much every single vert, with a couple of exceptions. Okay? The first thing, and I'm going to use my little marker here. Actually, it's a pen with a snow globe on the end. It's one of my daughter's pens. I'm not sure where she got it, but there you go. It's the best thing I could come up with. And then I left all my pens or all my pointers at school. You know, when they kicked us out, they kicked us out pretty darn quick. So didn't have a lot of time. They said, you better take everything just in case they close. You better take it out today. I thought, they're never going to close. Bam, then they close, and I couldn't get access to anything in my office, so that sucked. But anyway, so this is going to be my pointer, okay? So let's go through point by point, okay? There's the body. That's very simple, right? That whole unit, that's your body. The big hole right there, that's your vertebral canal. Remember, a hole is known as a foramen. So sometimes people will call that a vertebral foramen. I call it a vertebral canal, the big giant opening right there. The transverse process, these wings that stick out the side right here, that go off both sides. I'm holding it. I should probably do that, right? This whole wing over here, that's the transverse process, so the wings, right? Okay? The superior articular facets, we also are going to include the inferior, but the superior are the ones that are most recognizable, obviously, because they're much bigger, right? So, again, my assumption is this is upright to you. It's upside down to me, but we're going to assume, okay? This here, this smooth spot here, and this smooth spot here are your superior articular facets. They're on clearly the superior side. Let me rotate it and show you the inferior articular facets. Smooth spot here and smooth spot here. Now I'm going to have to rotate it a little because of shadows and all that. Yeah. Here. Here. Right? Those are the points where you have articulation with the vert that's either below it or above it. So there you go again. There are your superior articular facets here and here. I'm just trying to see. Well, how about, let me see if this vert is more impressive. Yeah, certainly, definitely more impressive. Huge. They jump way, way up. Just like that. They're flat. This is one thing that's going to come up later on, is that I can put a pin right on those articular facets, and it essentially goes straight across, just like this. You will see later on with the lumbar, they don't have that same, what I call a blade. They don't have that blade appearance, right? Okay, like that. And there you go. There they are. And if I rotate it, we can check out the inferior articular facets. Once again, I'm not sure which way is upside right, but this has the best shadow, I think, here and here, right? So basically what's happening there is we can take these verts and we can stack them. Like that. So you can see the superior articular facet, the inferior articular facet, and they go together like that, right? And there's one other thing, of course. The vert bodies don't touch one another. They actually have an intervertebral disc. This is a rubber disc, obviously, but it would be made out of cartilage in a real individual. So those go like right in there. It doesn't fit well. It's not actually the right one. I just grabbed one and jammed it in there. It's good enough, right? So that's how the verts look. That's what they look like, stacked on top of one another with that intervertebral disc, that cartilaginous disc there. That's what helps sustain the blow, the energy that is being projected downward by all the weight from up above. And it's also why you shrink during your lifetime. Partly it's because of compression fractures actually in the vertebral bodies themselves. They actually crush due to these fractures from old age, but also the compression of that intervertebral disc. It's also why at night you actually stretch out a little bit, and so when you wake up in the morning, you're actually the tallest you will be all day the moment you wake up, because those intervertebral discs have been allowed to kind of plump back up, relax over the course of the night. And then you wake up, you're nice and tall, and throughout the day they slowly start to flatten and you shrink in size. So let's take all of that stuff away and go back to our original one. Finish this off. Okay, so those are the superior and inferior articular facets. I just put superior because on the image that's on the PowerPoint, that's only the superior side of the vert. I'd have to flip it over, have a second image, which I could, but I just didn't. But you have those inferior articular facets on the bottom side. And then the spinous process. The spinous process is the nose, or whatever you want to call it, the part that projects forward right here. Projects forward in the image itself, but not in the body. Remember, this tip right here, the tip of the spinous process, is the bump on your back, right? So again, all those spinous processes stacking up on one another create all those bumps as we go down. So that is a typical vert. Pretty much everything has that setup. There are a couple of exceptions, which I will show here in just a few minutes. Okay,